Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about Venus's big move into Pisces. She moved in on the 27th of January, and she is going to be here for 4 months until the end of May, May 31st. And this is really long time for Venus to be in a sign. Usually she's only in a sign for a few weeks. So we are experiencing this retrograde cycle during this time, as well as a lot of other planets joining her. So this is a pretty big moment that we're experiencing, and Venus is kind of ushering it in with her move into Pisces. Venus is our planet of happiness. She's our planet of our relationships and our capacity to relate with other people, our capacity to share happiness with other people. In Pisces, she's considered exalted. She's considered in her highest intelligence for this. But we have to be aware that this is because of a lack of attachment to these things working out. So it's not necessarily that we become better at compromise or better at making ourselves happy. When she's in her own signs of Taurus and Libra, we can really see that shift into, accommodating others with Libra, or in Taurus, really taking care of our bodily needs and really taking care of the things that bring us happiness and pleasure. In Pisces, what we see is this sort of offering it up to something greater than ourselves, this desire to be happy beyond the material circumstances that give us happiness or that we believe give us happiness. It's exalted happiness. It's happiness for no reason. And this is a really important distinction to understand because oftentimes people will have Venus in Pisces and they don't necessarily have relational success, or they don't necessarily even have monetary success or the pleasure and joy and happiness that other people seem to have. And this is why it can cause a lot of confusion and fantasy in our relationships. Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac. It's the sign where everything is merging into one, this big sea of oneness. And we're we're no longer distinguishing. We're no longer creating all those lines and all those boundaries around things. And so everything can become pretty muddled. We might feel that, love is everywhere, or we might find love in the midst of situations that we might have in other cases been triggered by or felt like our needs weren't being met. So we can sometimes bypass our material needs here in favor of that oneness and that feeling of love. We might have a fantasy or an illusion that something is perfect, and it's not necessarily actually going to pan out that way because, as most of us know, love and relationships are complicated, and they have to take place in real time, and most people have needs that need to be met, and they need to be met in a day-to-day kind of a way, often including mundane activities like eating and paying bills and taking care of things, and love is an action. We see that people show us love by the things they do. A mother cares for her child. She loves the child unconditionally, but she does things for that child. And if she didn't do things for that child, we would consider that neglect, right? Similar in a relationship. If two people don't do things for each other to create the relationship, then it's neglected. And it can't just live in this sort of fantasy and illusion space. So this is one of the things that we see that shows up with Venus in Pisces. It's so much illusion and mystery and beauty and joy beyond. It's beautiful for, say, bhaktas and bhakti yoga, which is like the yoga of devotion and love, where we're just putting love into the world. But we also need to recognize that it has its limitations in our actual lives and how it shows up in terms of our relationships and our capacity to even take care of ourselves, even that self-care that we really see when Venus is in Taurus. So I'm going to share my screen just so we can see some of what's coming up because it is a 4 month transit. We have this I just jumped right ahead to February 1st, which is a few days after Venus's move, but you can see this is the first time Venus and Rahu are coming together. And this is going to be something that's really going to increase that quality of illusion and mystery, perhaps, but also the concept that, we're seeing things different than they actually are. The rose-colored glasses that Venus and Pisces can have, Rahu's really going to increase that in many ways. Like that idea that something is perfect, or that we got a sign and this person's the perfect person for us, or this thing is going to bring us happiness. Rahu really increases that quite a bit. And the entire time that Venus is in Pisces, Rahu's going to be there also. Now, at certain times, they're going to be joined. And this is right off the bat, February 1st, they're together. And you can see the moon has just moved into, for her first time, she's going to move in every month. So it will happen, I think, probably 4 times over the course of her time here. And people really love Venus and the moon together. It's something everybody's like, oh, Venus and the moon together, I must have connection. But the truth is, the two are actually not very friendly to one another. Venus is that conditional love, again, where we want something in return, and moon is that unconditional love, where we're just nurturing and giving like a mother to their child. Now, the unconditional love of the moon is different than Pisces. Pisces isn't just giving endlessly with nothing asking in return. Pisces is more spiritual. It's bringing it to something higher. It's a love for God, a love for spirit, a love for all things. It doesn't necessarily indicate that heavy nurturance and giving that Cancer often has. And you can see when Venus is in Cancer, when the moon is in Libra, you can see some of these challenges really come up around the conditional and unconditional love. But nonetheless, this weekend we can see with the conjunction of Venus and the moon so close to Rahu, there's going to be a lot of that illusion, that fantasy, those rose-colored glasses coming out to play. And sometimes the downfall of that can be difficult. And that's what we're going to experience over this 4 months is some highs where we're really like, oh, it's so great and everything's so beautiful. And then some lows where those glasses come off and we start to see that our actual reality isn't quite the same as what we were imagining or what's in our fantasy. And these dips are going to come with some of the different transits. And we can see, right now the two of them are moving away from each other. But now Mercury is here and Mercury has joined Rahu. This is March 1st, and you can see the two of them are really close together. Even, uh, no, it's really pretty much on this first, probably a little earlier in the day, the two of them are exact. So now our communication, anything someone says, is really, what is that message? What is that sign? We have to remember that Mercury is debilitated here. So while Venus is exalted here, Mercury is the most challenged in Pisces because Mercury is where we want to say something. We want to use words to explain our reality to someone else. We want to understand someone else's reality through our brain, through our mind. And with the linelessness and that kind of swimming sea that is Pisces, we don't have those lines drawn around it. And so it's hard to make sense of something. Everything becomes just like anything else. And it can become very difficult to understand what communication is trying to say. So things get said that we don't mean, or people interpret it in a way that wasn't what the intention was. And you can bet that Rahu is going to increase that quite a bit. There's going to be a lot of projections that occur through this cycle because Rahu does that. It thinks it knows what something else is doing or what something else is happening. And whatever planet is joined Rahu really gets affected by Rahu's energy. This node in particular can magnify what's happening and create a tidal wave of emotions. Rahu and Pisces, this has been a year-long transit at this point where we've seen how that airy and exaggeratory nature of Rahu in a water sign can affect us emotionally. It can affect the actual waters, and it really splays everything out and makes it scattered and more challenging to collect ourselves emotionally because everything is everything, and now it's also all sprayed all over the place. So this is, one of the attributes of water is that it comes together, that it glides and moves together and is naturally bonded to itself. And Rahu really puts some space in between the different water molecules and can spread us out and make the words even more confusing. So we have, that happening. And then we have the sun moving in on the 14th, I believe. Well, we've gotten to the 15th and the sun is here. And of course, there's an eclipse on the 13th. 13th, 14th, depending on where you are. So the sun will still be at the very end of Aquarius during that eclipse. The moon will be at the very end of Leo, and then they jump into this sign. I'll just go back a day. Um, I guess even 2 days in order to get there. So we we're going to have just planets piling into this place. This isn't about the eclipse, so I'm not going to get too far into that. So we have the sun there, and then we move 2 weeks later, we have Saturn move in on the 29th. So now you can just see how many planets are around Venus. So Venus's exalted place, and I missed where she went retrograde here, but she went retrograde on the 1st. Um, sorry, little Pisces action myself going on. Um, she goes retrograde on March 1st. So that's the first point of where we really start to backtrack on any of the places where we were feeling maybe, fantasy illusion, everything's working perfectly. And now maybe some of that's backtracking. We're going backwards. Sometimes with Venus retrograde, we might run into past lovers. Although I really find that whatever rules your seventh house brings that up more than Venus specifically. But if you are an Aries or a Scorpio, then Venus does rule your seventh house. Particularly for Aries people, this is going to be a lot around fantasy and illusion because it's their 12th house as well. So you can really see how the retrograde motion is adding to the confusion as well, right? The reason she's in this place of exaltation for so long is because there's a retrograde period, which always takes away some of that element of exaltation. When it's retrograde, it's internal energy. We're not acting out with that way. We're feeling it build up inside of us, and the beauty and intelligence of the planet in that sign doesn't get its outward action or manifestation. It happens internally instead. Um, and at this point, we have, Mercury and Rahu together and the moon. And so this was, way before I didn't mention that. And now Mercury goes retrograde at some point in here. Look, it looks right about here, right? Right. It's right after the eclipse, actually, that Mercury goes retrograde. So now we have both of them retrograde. So the communications retrograde. Well, Mercury can help a little bit because he's debilitated here. With Venus, it's challenging. They're very close degrees to each other. Rahu's still here. And then 2 weeks later, we have Saturn move in. So Venus is not just experiencing this beauty and this harmony and this, love for no reason and happiness for no reason. We're really seeing, you know, a lot of challenging energies here with the sun. This is the new moon eclipse we're going to have, so the sun is here, Rahu's here, and Saturn. So we have three malefics, and then we have both Mercury and Venus retrograde. Mercury's debilitated. There's just a lot of things running here. It's a lot of energy in one place, and it's going to stifle that pure Venus and Pisces experience that we might have. And, as the time goes, some of the planets will start to move out. The moon certainly will be the first to go, and then the sun will move out. But you can see Venus, as she starts forward moving again, is going to hit Rahu. And I didn't catch where she retrograded back over Rahu, but she certainly did retrograde back over Rahu. Now, Mercury is exact with Rahu again, April 12th. And now, the sun is out, but Venus is coming back in conjunction with Rahu. We have Rahu Saturn exact here. All of these things are going to be affecting our experience with Venus. So I think the main point, and it just, they start to pile out slowly. So eventually Mercury moves out, and eventually she's just left with Rahu and Saturn. And Saturn and Venus are quite friendly together. So we might think, oh, the moon and Venus, so nice. Saturn, Venus, bad. But, the friendly nature of the two actually work well together. We can see more commitment coming up, and a capacity to, you know, maybe find some practical action in our relational world, or in our capacity to take care of our own needs and our own happiness. So Saturn and Venus is not as problematic as we might think. But in the sign of Pisces, where we're already not that practical, and we already have a tendency to really you know really make everything part of this collective experience as opposed to honoring our own unique personal experience. There will be a lot of ups and downs in our own personal experience as this collective gets so much attention. And again, that presence of Rahu just can't be ignored. He's gonna be he's gonna be bringing a lot of illusion, a lot of delusion, a lot of smoke and mirrors, and confusion above anything else. Which, when you're talking about somebody's capacity to be happy in this world, and Venus is where we, remember, live in this world, we, you know, we have to honor the fact that happiness does come with some of those material things. When we're, there's the spiritual happiness of no reason and no matter, but very few people are actually achieving that. Most of us are living in this regular world with partners, with children, with, jobs and things we need, bills we have to pay, food we have to eat. We're not breatharians, we need things. And so Venus usually really honors that part of us. And Jupiter is the one who actually kind of rises above the fray and says, oh, there's, it's all in our spiritual attitude, that and can sometimes bypass our lived experience. So when Venus is in Pisces, and it's interesting that Venus is exalted in Pisces, because the truth is that Venus and Jupiter are not friendly. They're the two gurus. But again, Venus is the guru of the Asuras and Jupiter is the guru of the Devas. And the two of them actually don't get along. Jupiter's up here high and mighty, having this experience in the clouds, and Venus is like down on earth saying we have lust, we have greed, we have needs, we have relationships, and is honoring that more human reality that we have. And so the fact that she's exalted there means that we sort of let go of our human reality in order to achieve this higher level of love. But so few of us are really there that it actually doesn't always manifest. Like I said, for people, depending on what else you have going on in your chart, chances are there's a lot that's dragging you down to earth. The other thing that's really interesting about this transit is that for the majority of it, basically up until this point, and I'll share again just for a brief moment, up until this point that I just jumped to, where Jupiter just moved into Gemini, I think it was in the 14th that Jupiter moves into Gemini. Um, we have the two in each other's signs. Venus is in Jupiter's sign and Jupiter is in Venus's sign. And right now, while I'm making this video, Jupiter's retrograde, but he's going direct on February 3rd. So for the majority of this transit of, for about 3.5 months, the two are going to be in exchange of signs, which brings Jupiter's big worldly energy into the very grounded earthly sign of Taurus, where we care a lot about our needs. We care a lot about, money and security and possessions and beauty and happiness and pleasure. And very in a more selfish way, right, than in Libra. In Libra, it's much more interrelational. In Taurus, there's much more around the self that's happening, the pleasure and happiness that we need for ourselves. With Libra, it's, how can we get that pleasure with someone else? So this exchange is very interesting because it allows us to lend some of the intelligence of each other. It allows Venus to receive some of the intelligence from Jupiter, although she's already exalted and doesn't need it as much, but certainly Jupiter definitely needs that from Venus because Jupiter does not do well in Taurus or Libra. This is not the place that Jupiter's the happiest at all. And so having an exalted planet here in his other sign, giving that exchange of signs to him, offers him a little bit more, a little bit more awareness around not just being kind of greedy or gluttonous, which are some of the things that can happen when Jupiter's in Taurus. We can be very attached to growth on the material plane. And the ruler being in Pisces helps remind us of what we're really doing here and what's actually happening. And especially because Jupiter's been in this place for a year and just had his whole retrograde cycle where perhaps whatever we were expanding on started to deflate a little or go backwards, we have some perspective. Like, oh, okay, pretty much right after Venus moves in is when he starts his direct cycle. And this is a really good period of time for us to reflect upon how we, um, how we can make and create security for ourselves and create happiness and pleasure for ourselves without it being at the expense of our beliefs, our high beliefs, and our true connection to source. Because that's what can get very muddled, particularly when Jupiter's in the earth signs. That connection to what's true becomes very materialized. And so this is going to be a big blessing for Jupiter, a boon for Jupiter. It doesn't affect Venus as much because Venus is already exalted there and has so many other things running, that the presence of Jupiter in her own sign, if anything, is going to be another thing that kind of brings her down, actually, because Jupiter is in this material sign and isn't in high dignity. That's just one more thing that we have kind of making this transit less mystical and amazing. And I know I hate to be the bummer on that since so many people, are like, oh, Venus in Pisces, it's going to be so amazing. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a wild ride. And, it's a good time to learn how to swim. Like it's a good time to learn that there are moments for those of you who swim in the ocean, which I have my whole life. There's moments where the waves are really big. There's moments where you just have to duck dive. There's moments when you can lay on your back and feel like you're just floating and being totally held. And there's moments when you're doing that you find out you've just been taken very far out. You relaxed because it felt calm and there weren't waves on the surface, but actually the current was taking you really far out. And now you have a big swim back in. So it's really important to really notice the moods and the flows and the ebbs and know when, a surfboard is appropriate, know when you can, be in a little floaty device or when you need like a full ship. And also recognize your own capacity in all of that. Know if you're a strong swimmer or if you're not, and when to ask for help. Because the water element just brings up so much emotionally for us, even when it's in Pisces and it's less immediate. With Cancer, it's very immediate to our heart. With Scorpio, it's immediate in our relationships with others. Pisces, it has more of that universal energy. But when transits like this happen, they're affecting everybody. And every person you encounter, it's going to be in a different place in their life. And this is why I do my forecast for all 12 signs, because it's really important to know, where is this happening in my life? What house is that for you? Like I said, for Aries, that's your 12th house. Fantasy is abundant in the Aries chart for the next few months, especially around relationships. This can be secret affairs. This can be, things that they're not paying attention to and places they're not being present. This can really open up the realm of fantasy in a safe and healthy container. Um, but it's also, there's a lot they're not going to be aware of. For Libra people, it's their ruling planet in the sixth house of hard work, service, challenge. This is bringing up the need to move into karma yoga. So for each of us, it's very different. And I write about this in this week's stars report. I write about the new moon in Capricorn for each sign and Venus and Pisces for each sign. So if you want to go to patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology, and sign up for Cosmically Aligned, you can find out what Venus and Pisces means for you. Have a beautiful and blessed transit, and I'll see you soon. Namaste.